All right, we're in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, looking at verses 13 through 18. The first two questions are this. What two groups of believers does Paul identify in this passage? And what group does he place himself in? That's the second question. In verse 15 of 1 Thessalonians 4, Paul says this, "According to the Lord's own word, we tell you that we who are still alive, who are left till the coming of the Lord, will certainly not precede those who have fallen asleep." And here we have those two categories, those two groups of believers that Paul is identifying in the passage. He says those who are alive and who will remain, who are left until the coming of the Lord. And then on the other hand, he has those who will be asleep. And in the context, as well as other places in the Bible, this concept of being asleep refers to those who will be dead, and then resurrected at the coming of the Lord. The second question, what group does he place himself in? The group that he says we, the group in verse 15 here, he says, we who are still alive, who are left till the coming of the Lord. This is the group that Paul identifies himself with. In verse 17, he does the same thing here. After that, we who are still alive and are left will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Here again, Paul says the we, the group that he puts himself in, that's the group who will be alive. Paul did not expect to be dead and resurrected at the coming of Jesus, at least in this passage. The next question is, what group does he place himself in the following passages? 1 Corinthians 15, verses 51 through 53. I'll go ahead and read that because this, again, is showing Paul's concept of what group he believed he would be in at the coming of the Lord. "Listen, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed." It seems suggestive here that there's a distinction between those who will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. And he seems to be putting the we with the other group, the group that will not have to be raised, but the group that will be caught up to meet the Lord in the air, who will be changed without seeing death. This is a little more suggestive. This could be argued, I believe, but the 1 Thessalonians 4, I believe, is pretty explicit that Paul felt that he would be alive and left until the coming of the Lord, that he would not die before Jesus returned. 2 Timothy 4 and verses 6 through 8, presents another picture. Here Paul says, "For I am already being poured out like a drink offering," and hear this, "and the time has come for my departure." Now looking at the context here, this is 2 Timothy. It's one of, if not the very last letter that we have of Paul's that he wrote before his martyrdom in Rome. He's in prison in Rome here shortly before his death. And Paul here says that the time has come for his departure. Well, the departure used in the context, verse 7 says, "I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith." Sounds very much like he's talking about the course of his life has come to an end. The departure then would be the departure from this life. And verse 8, "Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing." So here Paul seems to be talking very plainly about his death. He says, the time has come for my departure. Not everyone's departure from this planet at the second coming of Christ, everyone being the believers, of course. But here the time of his personal departure seems to have come. So Paul seems to be believing that now he's actually going to die and have to receive his crown in a resurrected body. This is different, it seems, from what we see in 1 Thessalonians 4, where Paul again puts himself in the group of the believers who will not see death before the coming of the Lord. What can we make of all this? The fourth question brings us to 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 8 through 10. And I'll jump there and just read that so we can get a little context here as we look at this idea. 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 8. Verse 8, I'll just read verse 8 first. "But do not forget this one thing, dear friends. With the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. The Lord is not slow in keeping his promise," verse 9, "as some understand slowness, He is patient with you, not wanting anyone to perish, but everyone to come to repentance. And then this verse 10. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will disappear with a roar, the elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and everything in it will be laid bare. Peter's saying two things I want to bring from this passage here, that the day of the Lord will come as a thief, unexpected. Jesus says in Matthew 24, towards the end of it there, he says that if the good man of the house knew what time the thief was coming, he would not allow his house to be broken into. Jesus there talking about his own coming, he says in the next verse, then you should also be ready because the Son of Man comes at a time you think not. He's saying that his coming will be like a thief. Peter echoing this concept, that it will come as a thief. Paul actually, just continuing on in 1 Thessalonians, in chapter 5, Paul also says in verse 2, for you know very well that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. Jesus probably started this idea, and Peter and Paul are just echoing the words of Jesus here. The coming of the Lord is sudden, is unexpected. No one knows the day or the hour is a phrase that Jesus uses in talking about it. So what does this have to do with Paul? I believe despite all the revelations that God gave to Paul, despite all the visions he had, despite all the deep understandings, that God kept from Paul not just the day or the hour, but even the millennia, the century of his coming. God was pleased to keep Paul thinking that his coming, that Jesus' coming, would be in Paul's lifetime. And therefore, Paul would keep that coming in his mind like a thief. He would be always ready. You think of Paul. Do you think if Paul knew that Jesus wouldn't be coming for 2,000 years at least, do you think Paul would have sacrificed as much as he did to preach the gospel throughout all of the Mediterranean area? Do you think Paul would have made the sacrifices that he did, putting himself through sleepless nights, through privations, through shipwreck, being stoned, being beaten? Would he have sacrificed all of that if he knew that Jesus wasn't coming for at least 2 more thousands of years? No, I believe the fact that God kept Paul with this understanding that Jesus, with this belief, I should say, that Jesus was coming soon in his lifetime, this kept Paul vigilant, watchful, ready, and preparing himself and those around him for the coming of the Lord. Paul died. The generation after him died. The generation after that, the generation after that, generation after that, all the way up to our generation has died. And each generation has felt that in their lifetime, Jesus would come. And even now, we in our generation have so many signs, so many things going on in the world events, in our own personal life, and our experience with others. It seems very imminent that Jesus is coming. Should we doubt and say, well, maybe he's not coming because Paul was wrong, and those after Paul were wrong, and those after them were wrong? Maybe we're wrong in thinking that Jesus is coming soon. Well, of course, for one generation, they won't be wrong. We don't know if we are that generation or if it would be the generation to come or the one after that. But it seems that it's in the will of God for his people to always, always live as though Jesus' coming is soon. This cry, this exhortation, this admonition is throughout the New Testament writings, telling us, be watchful, be ready, prepare yourself, gird up your loins, let your lights be burning, don't let your candle go out. All of these things telling us that we need to live with a readiness for the soon coming of Jesus. Now, what does that mean, though? What does it mean to be ready, to keep your lights burning, to gird up your loins? What does it mean to live as though Jesus' coming is in your lifetime? Well, definitely we can take a page from the life of Paul and see how he lived. But I do want to emphasize this singular point. The coming of Jesus, the Jesus coming for those who have kept the beginning of their confidence steadfastly in. John says it in this word, in this phrase, the victory that overcomes the world is our faith. It's our trust in Jesus that will determine where we stand when Jesus does come. So if we are to prepare ourselves for that coming, if we are to prepare ourselves for his coming, what we would need to be doing is ensuring that we have a firm trust and grasp on Jesus. ensuring that we are holding the beginning of that confidence steadfast to the end, that though many temptations, many distractions, many encumbrances, many besetments, many things are trying to draw us away, keep us distracted with the things of this world, keeping us entertained, keeping us preoccupied, keeping us worried, keeping us engrossed in the events of this life and the events of this world, though all of those things are vying for our attention, we must keep our eyes on Jesus, the author and the finisher of our trust, our faith in him. And in preparing ourselves and keeping ourselves ready for Jesus' soon coming, we need to increase our trust in him. How do we increase that trust? Well, the same way the rest of the Bible exhorts us, by maintaining a strong, consistent relationship with him, talking to him, learning more about him, learning more about his trustworthiness, reminding ourselves of the reasons that we trust him, reviewing those reasons, exercising trust in him and seeing how it works. Saying, I'm going to try and trust you with this area of my life, Lord Jesus. I'm going to try and trust you with my finances. Take charge and give direction. What are your ways in how I should order my money? What are your ways in how I should order my relationships? What should I do differently in my marriage? What should I stop doing different? What should I stop doing in my friendships? I'll try and trust you in that. I'll try and trust you with my entertainment choices. I'll try to trust you with the way I execute my duties at work. I'll try and trust you with that. And when we see that he is trustworthy, when we've tasted and seen that he is good, then we will grow in our trust in him. But this, I believe, is where our focus needs to be, given the fact that Jesus' coming is soon. And of course, it's always mentioned that even if his coming, his physical coming, is not in our lifetime, when our life will end, that is his coming for us. And that could happen at any moment. But given the imminence of Jesus' return, let us put our focus, let us put our emphasis on growing in our trust in Jesus.